In the northern land of Macedon, far from the golden temples of Athens, a boy was born who would one day dream of ruling the world. His name was Alexander, son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias, and from the moment of his birth in 356 BCE, the stars seemed to whisper of destiny. His mother told him stories of Achilles, the great warrior of Troy, and insisted that divine blood ran through his veins. His father, a brilliant and ruthless king, believed in preparing his son to lead an empire, not just a kingdom. From a young age, Alexander showed a fierce hunger for knowledge and greatness. At 13, he was placed under the tutelage of the philosopher Aristotle, one of the greatest minds of the age. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander studied philosophy, medicine, science, and literature. But most of all, he learned to think deeply, to see the world not just as it was, but as it could be. As Alexander grew, so did his reputation. At just 16, while his father campaigned elsewhere, Alexander governed Macedon in his absence and crushed a rebellion. He named the conquered city Alexandropolis, his first taste of legacy. By 18, he led troops in the Battle of Chaeronea, fighting at his father's side and proving himself as a warrior and commander. Then, in 336 BCE, a sudden and bloody event changed everything. King Philip was assassinated at a grand wedding celebration. Many suspected palace intrigue. At just 20 years old, Alexander ascended the throne. The Greek city-states, long resentful of Macedonian power, saw a young and untested king and began to rebel. But Alexander acted swiftly. He marched south, demanding loyalty. At Thebes, when defiance turned to open revolt, he crushed the city completely, sparing only temples and the house of the poet Pindar. His message was clear: challenge me, and I will erase you. With Greece subdued and order restored, Alexander turned his eyes eastward. His father had dreamed of conquering Persia, the vast empire across the Aegean. Now, Alexander would take that dream and make it his own. But he sought more than just victory. He hungered for glory, for a name that would echo through the ages, for a world united under his rule. In the spring of 334 BCE, he crossed the Hellespont with an army of Macedonians and Greeks, around 40,000 strong. As he stepped onto the soil of Asia, he cast a spear into the ground, claiming the land as his by right of conquest. It was the beginning of a journey that would stretch over 22,000 miles, rewrite the map of the known world, and shape history forever. The Persian Empire, ruled by King Darius III, stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. Its wealth and armies were vast, and its rulers proud. But Alexander, defying advice from his generals, charged across the river and struck with ferocity. He fought at the front, his helmet shining like a beacon. Swords clashed, horses screamed, and Alexander nearly died when a Persian noble raised his axe above him. At the last moment, one of his companions struck the man down. The victory was decisive. Asia Minor began to fall under his control. From there, Alexander swept through cities, often offering peace if they surrendered, and swift destruction if they resisted. He entered Gordium, home of the legendary Gordian knot, which no man could untie. Legend said that he who solved it would rule all Asia. Alexander, faced with its complexity, drew his sword and sliced through it. "It does not matter how it is done," he said, "only that it is done." But his true test came at Issus in 333 BCE. There, Alexander met Darius III himself, who brought an army said to be 5 times larger. Darius expected an easy victory. But Alexander, choosing his ground carefully, outmaneuvered the Persians. He led a direct charge at Darius's center, driving fear into the heart of the Persian king. Darius fled the battlefield in panic, leaving behind his chariot, weapons, and even his family. Rather than harm them, Alexander treated Darius's wife and mother with respect, even honor. This act shocked many, but it showed that Alexander saw himself not just as a conqueror, but as a king of kings, one who ruled with both sword and vision. City after city fell: Tyre, Gaza, and then Egypt, where Alexander was welcomed as a liberator. In Egypt, he founded the city of Alexandria, one of many that would bear his name. There, he visited the oracle of Ammon at Siwa Oasis. The priests declared him a son of Zeus Ammon, a god among men. The idea began to shape him. No longer just a Macedonian king, Alexander now saw himself as chosen by the gods, destined to lead all peoples. Yet with every step forward, the challenges deepened. His army, though loyal, grew weary. The lands became stranger, the climate harsher. But Alexander drove them on, promising glory beyond imagining. As he advanced into the heart of Persia, Darius gathered another massive army. The next battle would determine the fate of an empire. In 331 BCE, on the wide plains of Gaugamela, Alexander faced his greatest battle. Darius III had gathered the largest army the ancient world had seen, hundreds of thousands strong, with war elephants and scythed chariots. But Alexander, calm and precise, had studied the battlefield and prepared his troops. He allowed Darius to stretch his lines wide. Then, using a clever feint and a sudden strike at the Persian center, Alexander shattered their formation. Again, Darius fled. The Persians, seeing their king abandon the field, Alexander entered Persepolis as a conqueror. There, in a moment of triumph, or madness, he allowed the palace of Xerxes to burn. Some said it was revenge for the Persian destruction of Athens. Others saw it as a symbol. The old world had ended. But conquest did not satisfy Alexander. Darius was still alive, fleeing east. Alexander pursued him relentlessly through the rugged lands of Media and Bactria. When Darius was betrayed and murdered by one of his own generals, Alexander mourned him and executed the traitor. He now claimed the Persian throne not by conquest alone, but by right. He began to wear Persian robes and demanded that his men bow before him, a custom called proskynesis. Many of his Macedonian officers were disturbed. They had followed a warrior king, not a foreign god king. Tensions rose. In a drunken argument, Alexander killed Cletus the Black, one of his oldest friends, the man who had once saved his life at Granicus. Stricken with guilt, Alexander locked himself away, grieving and lost in thought. Yet he did not stop. He pressed on into the Hindu Kush, toward lands the Greeks had barely heard of. In 326 BCE, at the Battle of the Hydaspes River, Alexander faced King Porus of India. Porus came to battle on elephants, creatures Alexander's men had never fought. The river swelled with rain and the terrain was treacherous. Yet Alexander, using feints and clever crossings, split the Indian army and attacked at dawn. The battle was brutal, but Alexander won. Impressed by Porus's courage, Alexander not only spared him but made him an ally, saying, "You are like a king, therefore you shall remain one." But now his men had reached their limit. Tired, wounded, and thousands of miles from home, they refused to march farther into India. For the first time, Alexander gave in. He turned back, sailing down the Indus and returning west through the deserts of Gedrosia, where many perished from thirst. He had conquered lands from Greece to India, but it came at a price. His men were weary, his generals divided, and his dream of unity began to fade. Yet in his eyes, there were still worlds left to win. Alexander returned to Babylon in 323 BCE. Though only 32 years old, he had done what no man before him had dreamed possible. From the shores of Greece to the edge of India, he had stitched together the largest empire the world had ever seen. Yet as the dust of war settled, a new battle awaited him. Not one of swords, but of time. He began reorganizing his empire, marrying Roxana, a noblewoman from Bactria, and arranging similar marriages between his soldiers and local women, hoping to blend cultures into a single, united world. He welcomed scholars, builders, and administrators. Plans for great cities and new campaigns were drawn. He dreamed of pushing west to Arabia, perhaps even beyond. But Alexander was no longer the tireless youth who had crossed the Hellespont with burning eyes. The years of endless... He drank heavily, perhaps to dull the pain of ambition unfulfilled. In June of that year, he fell suddenly ill after a banquet. Some claimed it was fever, others poison. For over a week, he grew weaker, unable to speak or rise. His generals stood by, silent and afraid. When asked to whom he left his empire, Alexander whispered, "To the strongest." On the 10th day, the warrior who had never lost a battle died. The world was stunned. The man who had seemed like a god, invincible, eternal, was gone. His body, preserved in honey, was eventually laid in a golden sarcophagus and taken to Alexandria, the city he had founded in Egypt. Crowds wept in every land he had ruled, but with his death, the dream began to unravel. His generals, the Diadochi, fought bitter wars to divide his empire. Kingdoms splintered. Egypt went to Ptolemy, Asia to Seleucus, Macedon to Antigonus. Unity vanished. The vision of one world under one ruler crumbled. Yet Alexander's legacy was not erased. He had spread Greek culture, language, and ideas across vast regions, blending East and West in ways never seen before. Cities bearing his name thrived as centers of trade, learning, and culture. His tactics were studied for centuries. His courage became legend, and his name, Alexander the Great, was etched in the memory of empires to come. Even centuries later, generals like Caesar, Napoleon, and Julius Augustus would speak of him with awe. Poets wrote of him, kings compared themselves to him, and still, children in far-off lands learned of the young Macedonian who tamed the world. Alexander died young, but in death, he achieved what he had always desired: immortality.